When I was in ninth grade, actually, about 10 boys attempted to rape me. I told my teacher. And my teacher added saying, "Listen, dear, I think they are trying to correct you." I was called by many names like Chaka, Ma, Good Boy, Double Parata. For 4 years of my life, I survived on sex. I tried to commit suicide 3 times, but survived for whatever reason. Then I looked up and said, "What do you want from me? I don't want to die in pain. Now I will show you how to live." Thank you. Before I could start, I just want to say something. A boat does not cross the ocean by fearing the waves. Friends, those who try never lose. Those who try never lose. My name is Abhina Aher. I belong to the teen now transgender community. I am a now trans activist and I work at this. Point of time as an associate, director with India Lions on gender sexuality rights. I also have my own community-based organization, Tweet Foundation, Transgender Welfare Equity Empowerment Trust, I created. India's first transgender dance group called Dancing Queen. I am extremely happy to be here in front of all of you today. Safal, I just want to give thanks to Joe Stock for giving this opportunity. You know, I don't know where to start from basically about my life, but when it comes to my life, I think, let me try to understand how I dealt with it. Life becomes money time. When we discuss things about life, we often get confused about how so much of life has passed by, how it went by, and what things helped us move forward in this life. For me, in my life, the opposition and negativity I faced were the very things I worked with to try and turn them into something positive. I tried to work with what was not working in that situation and tried to resolve this matter. Today, I am going to talk about all those things. You know, I belong to a middle-class Maharashtrian family and I was born in Mumbai. Unfortunately, my father passed away when I was 3 years old, so the entire responsibility fell on my mother to raise a child and help them progress. Fortunately, she had a job with the BMC. She had a BMC job, and she was working as a clerk at that point of time. She decided to raise this child. Fortunately or unfortunately, what she found out at the age of 6 was that she actually had a son. And she was extremely happy. About that, I realized I have to take off my son, but she found out that actually I had a huge amount of issues when it comes to my gender expression. So I was born in a male body, but at the same time I was not male at all because my mind was of a woman. Actually, I was in a situation where my body was one thing, but my mind and heart were something else. So it was very difficult for her to understand that. Many people come to me and ask about the early symptoms and how one knows if a person is transgender. For me, I didn't need anyone to tell me. I didn't even know the meaning of the transgender situation. For me, the situation was that I was trapped in the wrong body. And at that point of time, I still remember that I was trying to tell myself something different. So the whole society was looking at me in a different way. And when I used to look at myself in the mirror would tell me something else. There is a very interesting story related to this that I want to share. My mother has learned Bharatanatyam, Odissi, and folk dance. And she used to perform professionally at this point of time, along with her job. I always used to go to watch her programs. And when we came back home, I would always insist on learning from her. "Hey mom, I want to learn dance from you. Please, can you teach me dancing?" And she used to look at me and say, "Listen, you know boys don't dance." But that didn't stop me at all. You know, it was exactly like this. What I used to do is that we would perform on the stage and I would look at her. I just had to look at her. And I was like on the edge of my seat, you know. We would do little bits and look at her, seeing how she was performing. She was a star for me. And all the time we used to perform, I would come back. And I would come back when she was a working woman, when she never used to be at home. What I used to do is put on all her jalati, everything. The 9-yard sari didn't fit me. But you know, I tried to wrap it around like a gift packet, and within that aspect, I used to start dancing in front of the mirror. One day, my mother came home early and saw her child in this avatar. After seeing me in this form, they did not understand what to do with such children, what to do. First, they beat me a lot, and then I was 7 years old. At that time, after beating me, they made me sit in front of God and said, "You know, you should write yourself 1,000 times. I will not do this again." That entire thing, I showed her every time I wrote, "I will do this again, but I will do it." At that point in time, something inside me was telling me that I should do it. I feel that my life is meant for dance. It has been a very important aspect of my life. Moving forward, I have used dance very effectively to address my issues. The entire platform of dance has supported me a lot. But as I moved forward, I had to face very important problems during my school days. Have you ever observed that me in our school science system, our educational system, there is always a binary. The boys sit on this side and the girls sit on that side. I belong to a vernacular medium, so everything was rigid there as well. I couldn't figure out where to sit here because I was supposed to sit with the girls, but unfortunately, I was made to sit with the boys. So I always went and sat on the last bench. Even during school time, when we talk about recess, all the boys would go to play cricket or run around playing tag, while I would sit with the girls applying, and then removing nail polish and doing all possible things. So femininity was already present in me. And because of this, the problem started that the other boys began to feel uncomfortable. The boys' discomfort eventually turned into a hatred. It escalated to such a level of hatred that when I was in 9th grade, about 10 boys actually attempted to rape me when my clothes were torn and I was taken behind the library and beaten badly. I was called many names like Good Mamuchak, and they tried to insert a ruler, actually a glass ruler, inside me. It was hard. I was bleeding. I went home that day, but I could not tell my mother. When I went back the next day, I told my teacher, and my teacher said, "Listen, son, I think they are trying to correct you because you are extremely effeminate. You should not be behaving like that. You are a boy, and you should be a boy." That was a disaster for me. I started thinking I was wrong, that my life was wrong for me, because the whole society was trying to tell me one thing, and I was feeling something else on my own level. When I was raped, it was a very sensitive point, perhaps. I would have left my education at that time. I would say that I cannot go and face those kids again, cannot go to that same bench, that same classroom in front of that same teacher who refused to support me. I couldn't take it, that entire perspective. Neither could I talk to my mother, because I knew how difficult it is for a single woman to raise a child who is gender variant. I still remember when I used to go with my mother, either after school or to any function, family function or market, people used to call me by different names. "Hey sissy, one eunuch, double paratha girl." I was called by many such names. When I was walking with my family, many times stones were thrown at me from behind. And I remember how traumatizing it must have been for my mother. During that time, I saw my mother crying alone. And it was a very difficult period for me as well, when I couldn't understand myself, nor could I support my mother. But many children still go through such incidents in society today. Many parents also go through such incidents. The other neighbors in our society contributed even more, because the neighbors here would come and talk to my mother. "You don't have a father figure in your life, so why do you teach yourself this way? You should teach your child how to behave properly." So for a mother or father going through such a situation, it becomes even more difficult. After all this torture, my problems only got worse. The biggest problem for me was that the loneliness inside me started consuming me. In our education system, in our family life, I would like to ask you all, where did you learn about what sex is, what sexuality is, and what sexual behavior is like. So many people will get up and say that we get to know from our friends, and that information was also incomplete. So imagine in a family system, in an educational system, there are no backup evidences, there is no backup support system for supporting people like me. How will those kids be able to become efficient people? How will they be able to have aspirations and succeed? So, self confidence. Every day with this incident, my self confidence kept going lower, lower, and lower. My mother's self confidence also kept going lower. But thanks to my mother, she never left me even after doubts that incident. After that, I went to the college system after school. Even then, I couldn't talk to anyone. I used to sit on a separate bench and tried to receive education in a different way. I remember when I first found out about a person who was begging at the signal, a Hijra person, and I didn't even know the name Hijra. I just saw that person and found them somewhat relatable. And I turned back to my mother and said, "Mom, who is this? Can I talk to them?" My mom turned to me and said, "Don't you dare talk to them. Don't go and talk to them. They are a bad person. They would kidnap children and turn them into people like themselves. If they saw that you were feminine, Makoto and those kids would take you away. Don't talk to them. Stay 100 feet away from them." And that was my first ever experience with somebody who is like me. I got scared. I got afraid. And I thought that this is what my future is. This is what I have to end up in my life. My mother did not have a child beside me, so there was family responsibility. And I was making mistakes somewhere in the whole process. One was the expectation from the family. The second was the lack of information. And the third was that the enabling environment was not supportive for me to move forward in such a situation. And in such a situation, I tried to do one thing. And many of us do that. I tried to commit suicide 3 times. But friends, that situation was also very funny. Looking back, by the time I was 13 or 14, I had become a bit more mature. When the first situation of attempting suicide came, we all depended a lot on movies. Bollywood films were our source to learn about committing suicide. So I remember the first time I tried to commit suicide. It was like any other Bollywood movie, where they show someone trying to hang from a fan. But unfortunately, the entire fan fell down on me, along with the ceiling. When my mother found out that something like this had happened, she asked me what I was doing. I told her I was trying to clean the fan, with the fan coming down. The second time, I remember when I tried to commit suicide. The second ideal situation was Bollywood. The industry provides you is cutting your how do you cut like this. Then everything is done. You are gone. You don't have to answer to anybody, as I was so happy. If I die, no one has to answer for it. Not my mother, not the school kid, not my parents. No one has to answer for it. I feel like finishing this life won't end this because I am not getting what I am doing, who I am, what are my issues, where I am going, it is happening. With my life, remember, inside of cutting my hand from this side and cutting my hand like this, and I still have those marks on my hand, but cutting here doesn't normally kill anyone, but I started screaming more because the pain was too much. So the neighbors kindly went and got bandages for me. The third time, I remember when I was going through suicidal tendencies, but before that, actually my mom started to notice repeatedly that I was going through such a situation where I had become very quiet. Because when I was unable to reciprocate with someone else and couldn't tell the other person what I was going through in my life, I closed the doors for people. I had shut people out of my life. I was not willing to talk to each other. I was not telling my mother what was going on in my life. My mother used to ask me, "Beta, what has happened to you? Why do you stay so quiet? What is the problem?" So I used to tell him, "My head is hurting a lot. I have a lot of pain in my head. I can't speak. I can't understand." So my mother took me to Baba Hospital, which is in Bandra. And there, they took me to a department to get checked. The doctor said that I am perfectly fine and there is no problem, and that there would be no such situation. So you close the windows and doors and give a tablet saying it will be fine. And my mom started doing the same things. Because of this, I spent more time in a closet. And in darkness, Even today, when I go to my house, we first close the windows and doors, which is a spontaneous, imaginary, psychological impact on a child. The third time I decided to commit suicide, I remember that I really liked the seashore, and I started walking into the sea because I wanted to finish this. By that time, I had completed 11th grade and had failed 12th grade because I couldn't cope with people. People judged me for having long hair and for making it every day. The third time I attempted suicide, I developed a phobia of water. When water started entering my nose and ears, I began to scream even more, and people saved me during that whole process. But when I survived 3 suicide attempts, for whatever reason, I looked up and said, "What do you want? Fine, I won't die. Now I will live and show you. And I will live with such determination that I will help many people like me find their way." And that was the most important turning point in my life. Friends, when I stopped thinking about dying and started thinking about living, doors began to open, one by one. As I started thinking about living, I began getting new opportunities, and I started finding ways out of situations where there were problems. I began trying to identify solutions in those situations, and that was a huge turning point for me. After that, I decided that if I have to survive in life, I have to make sure that I complete my education. No matter what comes my way, if I don't complete my education, I won't get the support I need. My family, if I don't complete my education, I don't get to be something. And if I don't complete education, I will be trapped in a vicious circle of poverty. We have no job and I have no options open. Many children who go through the same big phase as me due to dropping out of the educational system and not having any support, they don't get jobs because they don't complete their education. Their families lack support. They run away. And at such times, many of my transgender sisters or transgender people have to beg and do many other jobs. Friends, one more important thing that brought a change in my life was when I identified an organization called Humsafar Trust. Humsafar Trust is one of the oldest organizations in India that works for the LGBTQ community. I met Mr. Mishra, who is one of the founding members of the organization, and that was also a very interesting story because I couldn't find the organization initially. I found a magazine for the organization which had a sketch of 2 boys hugging each other. Out of curiosity, I found that magazine and read it. It was called Bombay Dost. At that time, you needed a place to read such a magazine. You couldn't read it at home or at the workplace. During that time, I paid to read a magazine in a public toilet to find out what it contained. It provided information about an organization, so I searched for that organization. After finding it, I met Ashok Rao at Humsafar Trust. Ashok Rao is a very prominent journalist. When I met him for the first time, I said, "Ashok sir, I feel like I am weird. I am not normal." He asked, "Why?" And I replied, "Because I am not normal. I was born for something else and I consider myself to be something different. I am not normal." So Ashok sir said there were 5 apples on the table. He asked, "Which one do you think is right or wrong?" And I said that it's just an apple. What's the big deal about it? So he said that everyone has different colors. I said, "No, the shape is the same." Then he said that deformity is also a part of nature. If you consider yourself deformed, you are not deformed. Everything in the universe is natural and organic. This was a very important point in my life when I stopped feeling guilty about myself. Many of you might feel guilty because of some flaws or shortcomings, but you should not feel guilty about yourself. At the same time today, I also realized that when I accepted who I am, my life's journey started to become much better because I began to understand what is right and wrong for me. When I told my mother that I was born one way but identify as a woman, she understood I wanted to live life as a woman, but they couldn't understand that. There was a lot of pressure, and my mother told me to leave the house. My mother said, "Is this why I raised you? Did I lack something in my upbringing? Did I fall short in helping you move forward? There was a lot of pressure from Indigo, one of all two, that I should listen to my mother and live my life this way. At that time, in many situations, I could have also run away from home. I could have run away from my home. I told my mother that I couldn't leave her alone in such a situation and that I should work with her, because it took me about 18 to 20 years to understand myself and realize that I am a woman. I can't expect my mother to understand and accept in one day that I am a woman. People need to understand that as much time you require to understand your own sexuality and gender, your families also require. It takes a similar amount of time to accept you as what you are, and you need to provide support. So what I am trying to say to you is that in this situation, also identify the negativity. I decided to work with my mother. When I was at Humsafar Trust, I worked for many years, and then I decided to undergo my transition. So at that point of time, there were so many things that were changing in my body. I was going through hormone treatment, and my body was getting longer. I was transitioning from a male body to a female body over a period of time. And then I realized that suddenly no one was ready to give me a job. And there were many people I was approaching for a job. And I'm talking about like 13 years back, when there was no transgender legality. There was no Supreme Court judgment on transgender people as a third gender. And we were still considered as gay people, not as transgender women. At that point of time, I remember going to several people for a job, and people used to say, "You look fine, but you need to cut your hair. You need to wear male clothes if you want to work here. If you want to work here, you can't talk in a feminine manner." So people were not willing to give jobs at that point of time, despite me being educated, despite having qualifications, and despite having all the possible experience to work in a software industry or setting. As a result of that, I had no choice but to be part of sex work for 4 years of my life. I survived on sex work, and I also wanted to have a huge amount of money for my gender transition. Friends, it is very important for you to understand that when you transition from one body to another vehicle, a lot of cost is involved. I have heard many people say things like, why do these people beg for money, or why do they engage in sex work? Why do they do such wrong things? And not even one of them thinks, if it is not my responsibility to give these people a life of dignity, to give them a job, to give them a chance to live. But we all get more involved in criticism rather than understanding what they are going through in their lives, what situations they are facing. For me, when I was talking about my transition, I needed at least 10,000 rupees, which included my hormone injections, each costing approximately 1,000 to 1,500 rupees, and other cosmetic surgeries involved. Because gender formation is very significant in the life of a transgender person. When I see myself as a woman, I want to look like a woman. I did not want to look like a man, and there was a cost involved for that, and I did not have a job. During that time, I engaged in sex work. I still remember standing by the railway tracks doing sex work. I used to have about 10 clients in a day. Many of those clients would engage in sexual acts without paying. In fact, they would rape me, and all these things were happening to me. At that time, I remember 11 nights when we were running away from the police and had to hide in a gutter, because otherwise the police would have arrested us, and I was afraid that my family should not find out what situation I was going through. My mother should have no idea about what is happening in life. There was a day when some goons would come holding knives and swords, and they would have sex with us by threatening us with the tip of the sword or by burning us with cigarette butts. And this is not just my story. It is the story of many transgender individuals who try to live their life through sex work. There are many stories of transgender people who might stand in front of you asking for 10 rupees, because the cost of living, my friends, is 3 times higher for the transgender community. Have you ever thought about this? Or have you ever gone to a vegetable market to buy vegetables? Who I am is difficult for me because it doesn't matter if I have money in my pocket. What matters is how respectfully the person handing me the vegetables looks at me. And that's why when we talk about cosmetics, when we talk about healthcare, when we talk about legal services, we prefer to go to places where we receive dignity and support. So, when we talk about rent, I have been living in Delhi for 10 years now. When I came to Delhi 10 years ago, no one was willing to rent me a house. Even though I was working in an educated team, despite showing my educational certificates, no one needed to give a job letter to a transgender person to keep in the neighborhood, because everyone thought that if a transgender person lived in a neighborhood, they would ruin the entire area, corrupting the boys and girls. But they don't consider that the transgender person also has a life and has just as much right to live as everyone else. Friends, I was basically telling you about the difficult life I lived, unfortunately in sex work. There, I met a doctor named Sanjanti Velukar, who works in the field of HIV/AIDS. She was conducting a survey with the sex worker community, and I participated in that survey. She noticed that I was quite fluent in speaking English. She said, "What is your education and graduation?" She said, "Don't come to my office to find more videos like to work." I said, "Nobody is giving me a job. No one is ready to give me a job. And everybody is putting difficult conditions on me, which are not acceptable for me to work in an industry." She asked me to come. We sat across the table. She looked at me and said, "What's your name?" I said, "Ainya." "Fine, so answer me just one question and then we will talk about the job." I said, "Okay, fine. What question do I need to answer?" She said, "Do you want me to give you a job because you are a transgender person, or do you want me to give you a job because you are a professional?" And I said, "I want you to give me a job because I am a professional." But the problem is that a lot of transgender people like me do not even get to reach that position. Because when we CNWN, we enter into any door of a corporate sector or any industry, the God who is standing next to me will throw me out. I started working and then I never looked back because that was the most important opportunity that I wanted to have to make a difference to my community. You know, as a grassroots worker, it was never about me. I always thought about what I have gone through in my life, the situations that I have gone through in my life. I have to make sure that similar situations should not be faced by another person. If Abhina Aher did not get support at the age of 12, then if a person wants to transition at the age of 12, they should get that support. That support should be available to them, and such a system should be created. Many people working tirelessly in India compelled the Supreme Bench Court to take action in 2014 that on April 15th, 2014, the Supreme Court actually gave a judgment that just like men and when women, transgender people also deserve national rights. Even after receiving the Supreme Court's judgment, we worked very importantly on Section 377. Fortunately, on September 6, 2018, the Supreme Court also struck down Section 377. Now, our fight is about bigger issues. Our fight is about our rights, our equal opportunities, and our Ganki dignity. Friends, this fight is not over, but in the midst of this battle that I fought, I want to tell you that many people will remain confused because your sexuality is different. Many people will continue to be upset with their parents and with the situation because things did not happen the way they wanted them to. Harivansh Rai Bakchan says that if things go your way, it's good. And if I don't, it's even better, because if they don't, you get another opportunity to make them go your way. And that opportunity will only come when you try to find positivity in the situation. In the situation, try to find if among all the closed doors, there is a small window open through which I can see a ray of hope coming in. And with this, we can fill our lives with enthusiasm. Keeping this Josh talk in mind, we can bring changes to our lives.
Friends, before I close down, I just want to sing 2 lines. I hope you like it. This song has been a great inspiration for me in life, so I think. I will bid you farewell with these 2 lines. This journey is very challenging, but do not be sad, my dear companion. This journey is very challenging, but do not be sad, my dear and companion. The difficulties are not going to last. The destination is at the next turn. Believe in my words. Believe in my words. Do not be sad, my dear companion. This journey is very challenging, but do not be sad, my dear companion. Do not be sad, my dear companion. Do not be sad, my dear companion. Thank you.
Tell us what you think about this video, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe